just feel like there are so many better ways to show that a man is in love than to have him commit crimes. Hi, if you don't know me, I'm Kat. Welcome to my channel. I talk about books and pop culture here on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Check it out if you want. Otherwise, let's get into it. I posted a poll a couple days ago about which book you all wanted me to read next from the Bridgerton series, and at the time that I decided to start reading, Benedict's book was in the lead, but I noticed that Francesca's book, a lot of people also want me to read that, so I will do that one next, and then Eloise I will save for last because it seems like that's the one that people hate the most, and I am not really looking forward to meeting Sir Philip. I have a feeling that that man belongs in jail. So today we're going to be talking about An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn, which is the third book in the Bridgerton series. It is Benedict's book. I love Benedict from the show. He is so cute, goofy, silly. I think he has the most personality out of all the brothers, and I love that he is now confirmed bisexual. I had heard mixed things about his book, so I was pretty curious about how I would feel about it. But I do remember one commenter on my last video about Colin and Penelope's book. They were like, the Benedict we know and love from the show is nowhere to be found in the book, and unfortunately I have to agree, but we will get into it. I am going to do a summary, a pretty detailed summary, so if you don't want spoilers, just stop here. There's going to be so many spoilers. And after the summary, I'll be giving a general review and also talking about what I hope to see in the show for Benedict's season. The love interest in Benedict's book is Sophie, and it's set up like a Cinderella retelling, with Sophie being Cinderella. So Sophie is an illegitimate child of an earl, the Earl of Penwood, and it's kind of like an open secret. Like, everyone can see she looks exactly like him, but they're not going to say anything because he's an earl. The earl takes care of her and has a responsibility towards her, but that's about it. He doesn't really show her any affection or love. So she grows up with this really intense desire for belonging and affection and love and just family. When Sophie is still very young, her dad remarries, and he marries this woman named Araminta. She has two daughters, Rosamund and Posy. Rosamund is older, Posy is younger. Sophie, when she knows that her dad's gonna remarry, is so excited. She's like, I'm finally gonna have sisters, I'm gonna have a mom, I hope she loves me. And then Araminta walks in, sees Sophie, sees that she looks exactly like her new husband, and is like, oh hell no. She feels like it's a personal affront to her to have to live in the same house as her husband's illegitimate child, so she immediately hates Sophie. She even pulls Sophie aside and is like, don't be in the same room as me. If you see me, just go the other way. I don't ever want to see you. Which is really effed up to say to a small child. Or to any child. Rosamund takes a lot after her mom and treats her very cruelly, but Posy is more sweet and affectionate. Shortly after this, the Earl dies and leaves Araminta a small allowance. But the catch is she gets 3 times that amount if she keeps Sophie until Sophie is 20. He also leaves a dowry for all of the girls, Sophie included, so that they can get married. Araminta does not want Sophie. She's ready to cast her out of the home as soon as the Earl dies, but she decides to keep Sophie because she wants the money. But she treats her as a maid, and she forces Sophie to do basically the jobs of like 3 different servants. She is basically Araminta's emotional punching bag, and she doesn't see a cent of the money that Araminta gets for keeping her in the house. And Araminta does not tell her about the dowry that her dad left for her, so she believes that her dad left her nothing and that he left her in the care of this horrible woman who hates her. The story really begins when the Bridgertons host a masquerade ball, and this ball is really important to Araminta because she really wants one of her daughters to catch the eyes of Benedict Bridgerton. You can see where this is going. So all day Sophie is forced to get these girls ready, and of course she is not allowed to go. Sophie reads like every copy of Whistledown she can get, so it's like her dearest wish to be able to attend a ball. She can only watch sadly as they leave the house and go to the ball without her. But as a surprise, the housekeeper and the staff are like, Sophie, you gotta get ready. And she's like, what are you talking about? And they're like, we're gonna get you ready for the ball. They have a bath set up for her, they do her hair, they have all these old clothes they got from her grandmother's belongings that she can wear. They have her borrow a pair of Araminta's shoes because none of the other shoes fit her, which in a Cinderella story you can imagine will come back later. They also give her a pair of gloves that are embroidered with her grandmother's initials on them, which you can also imagine will come up later. The only catch is that Sophie has to leave at the stroke of midnight midnight because the carriage has to take her home and then go back and get the other girls. At the ball, Benedict sees Sophie and feels this instant connection. What really attracts him to her is that she just looks so genuine. She's looking at everything like it's the first time she's ever seen a ball, because it is. He sees her when she's being complimented by all these guys and she's just like really happy because it's like the first time that's ever happened to her. And he has this inner monologue which is very like, oh, she's not like other girls. She did not act coy, nor did she act as if she expected their compliments as her due. Nor was she shy or tittering or arch or ironic or any of those things one might expect from a woman. He approaches her and he realizes she doesn't know he's a Bridgerton. This is really important to our boy Benny because he's tired of people seeing him as a Bridgerton and not as his own person, even though he loves his family. So he's all like, ooh, she doesn't know I'm a Bridgerton, she likes me for me. And from Sophie's point of view, she also feels this instant connection with him. She thinks he's like a prince and she feels like a princess, and it's like a dream come true for her. They get to kissing on this balcony. At one point, they remove each other's gloves, like really sensually. But then she has to run away at the stroke of midnight. And he's like, when do I see you again? She's like, I can never see you again, and runs away. He's chasing after her, but he loses her. And all he's left with is this glove with these initials on them. Benedict is convinced that this is the woman of his dreams. He's met a ton of women, but this is the only one that has ever made him feel this kind of way, so he is determined to find her. He asks his mom about the glove and is like, do you know these initials? And she's like, that's Penwood. But then she also says, I don't like this lady Penwood. I think she's very cold and ambitious. And as we know, Violet Bridgerton's instincts are always correct. But this is the only clue that he has, so he goes to Araminta's house and calls on her and her daughters. At the moment that he arrives at her house, Araminta is actually berating Sophie about her shoes that Sophie had borrowed the night before. She sees a scuff on them. She's like, they're new. Someone wore them. And then her butler tells her Benedict is there to visit, and she's like, Sophie, go tell Rosamund to lock you in the closet. Truly evil stepmother antics. So when Benedict actually visits and they're talking, he realizes Araminta is really mean to the servants. She's constantly yelling at them. She actually brings up Sophie at one point, but of course it doesn't even register in his brain because he's like a rich, aristocratic guy. He's not going to even think about servants. He meets the daughters and realizes that neither of them are the lady in silver as he's been calling her in his head. He knows it's not Rosamund because she is too prissy and blonde, which I thought was really funny. And he also knows it's not Posy because, and this is a quote, her hair is too dark and she is too chubby. After reading Penelope's book, I've been kind of reflecting on Julia Quinn's relationship to, characters that don't really fit like very thin modern beauty standards. Keeping in mind that these books were written quite a while ago, I feel like maybe for that time she was trying to be inclusive in her own way, because she does often have these characters who are considered like unpopular or unattractive, and then she will have other characters like stick up for them or defend them, and that will like prove that these other characters are good people. So for example, she has Benedict be purposefully nicer to Posy because he knows that her mom does not prefer her, and the mom is trying to push Rosamund on him, or assuming that he would be attracted to Rosamund, and he's like, oh no, I'm really interested in meeting Posy. I feel like this is not really doing what maybe Julia Quinn intended. It is frustrating to see fat phobia written into a book where it really did not need to be there at all. After this, Benedict leaves. He's disappointed, and then Araminta sees him out the window. He's holding a glove with the initials on them, and she realizes that's the glove of the late Earl's mother. This is when she realizes that Sophie took the gloves and the shoes and was at the ball the night before, and that he was looking for Sophie. Araminta makes her try on the shoes that Sophie borrowed, and it fits her perfectly, and Araminta knows that her daughter's feet are too big to fit in those shoes. It's an interesting way to use the trope of the shoe fitting. She immediately kicks Sophie out of the house. She's like, I don't need a care and shelter for you anymore. You're past 20. You gotta go. But she makes Sophie polish all of her shoes first, and there's like 300 pairs of shoes. And she locks Sophie in the closet to clean all these shoes. So Sophie's one act of defiance that she can have is that she just doesn't clean the shoes, and she steals a pair of shoe clips that look like they could be worth something. Because again, she literally has no money. She hasn't been paid anything for all of her labor. Up until this point, I was enjoying the book. I think this is usually the pattern for me with Julia Quinn's Bridgerton books, at least, is that I will enjoy the first few chapters. I enjoy the banter. I like the setup of her stories. But it's usually when the romance really begins in earnest that she completely loses me. Because no matter what story it seems to be, I feel like the man is always doing something really fucking annoying. And don't worry, I will tell you all of the really fucking annoying things that Benedict does. So now the book fast forwards 2 years. Sophie is now working as a housemaid at the Cavender house. This is an estate that is in the country somewhere. I don't know English geography. Anywhere that's not London is the country, I think. And to her, this is a pretty great situation. Mr. and Mrs. Cavender are nicer and they actually pay her. So to her, it's like, wow, what an improvement. I have employers who pay me money. So it's all great until their son, Philip, comes home. And Philip is a real piece of work. He's always cornering her, sexually harassing her, trying to grope her, basically abusing his privilege as this rich man to do anything he wants to working class women. The parents go on a trip and their son throws a house party. And the entire day, she's just running away from all of his friends. They're trying to harass her. Benedict happens to be at this house party, and he's about to leave the house party. It's nighttime now. He's like, well, I have to say bye to the host because my mom taught me good manners. And he's trying to find Philip, and what does he see but Philip and 2 of his drunk friends trying to R-word Sophie. As if Sophie has not been through enough in this book already. So Benedict, not knowing it's Sophie, is like, if any woman is in distress, I'm gonna go help her because I have 4 sisters and I would hope that any man in my situation would do the same for them. Release the girl. I don't want to fight you, but I will. And I can assure you that the 3-to-1 odds don't frighten me. He's willing to take on these 3 drunk guys to save this girl he doesn't even know. I want to say this is like bare minimum behavior, but I know it's not. In this time period when servants and anyone working class was basically considered like third-class citizens, in reality, this is a really, really upstanding and moral thing for Benedict to do. So Benedict is like, I don't think she wants to be here with you guys. And Philip is like, it doesn't matter, she's my maid, she has to do whatever I want. Benedict addresses her directly and he says, Miss Beckett, would you be so kind as to answer the following question? No, she burst out. You're not going to answer? He asked, his eyes amused. No, I do not want to tub with these 3 men. I kind of got that this was supposed to be like funny, but I did not think it was funny to be making jokes while she's literally like in the arms of these 3 guys who are gonna like commit violence against her. But I also get that it's like supposed to be a lighthearted romance. But I don't love it when romance authors use like this trope of the guy saving her from violence against other men, especially sexual violence. I can see why people would like it. Like obviously it shows that the hero is of like good character, etc. But most of the time it's like the guy rescuing her from something that is so obviously violent. I feel like it can be like this idea of what like being sexually assaulted would look like that is not really congruent with what happens in reality. I guess there are just like more subtle ways that sexual assault can happen, which I feel like are, you know, not so like obvious and heavy-handed as a lot of these situations are written. And when they purely exist for the hero to show off like, I'm a good guy, I don't know if there's a good enough reason for that scene to be in a romance book. I know people have different opinions and like some people even think that it's like therapeutic to see these scenes in books, but that's just my personal take on it. So after he rescues her from these 3 guys, he's like, I'm gonna give you a position in my mom's household. And Sophie realizes he does not recognize her. And she is completely crestfallen. She's been dreaming of this guy for the past 2 years. Like, he's been the fantasy that kept her warm at night, basically, while she's been suffering for 2 years. And she finally meets him again and he does not recognize her at all. But she also realizes that, you know, her hair is cut shorter, she's lost a lot of weight, and obviously she was wearing a mask when she first met him. And he would be expecting an aristocratic woman from the ton and not a servant girl to be his lady in silver. She is sad and she also feels like she can't tell him that it was her because she would feel really silly about it. But in Benedict's internal monologue, we also know that he's been holding himself back from other women because he's been thinking about this lady in silver. Because what if he put his ring on some woman's finger and the next day he saw her? It would be enough to break his heart. No, it would be more than that. It would be enough to shatter his soul. So they definitely had like an insta love connection, love at first sight. For me, I did not really get why he would still be thinking about her after 2 years. I didn't think she was that different from other girls. Feels very much like he fixated on her as his ideal because he was so, I guess, disillusioned with the other women that he had met, and she just seemed like so different. But he doesn't really know her, but this is his ideal woman that he wants to be with. And so every other woman that he's met in real life just does not match up to this ideal he has in his head. Because how could they? Like, if you're a real life person, you can't stand up against someone's concept of what their ideal person is. Benedict takes her to his cottage, which is nearby. It is called My Cottage, like capital M-Y and a capital C cottage, just for fun, I guess. They get caught in this horrendous rainstorm. Benedict, who had a cold recently, begins to feel sick again. He starts coughing violently. And his sickness is also out of nowhere and very obviously a forced proximity plot device to get them together. She basically has to undress him to get him into bed, which obviously is another opportunity for horny behavior, which is what this trope is for. Sophie even has to get up in the middle of the night to take care of Benedict. This part I found really hilarious because he's dreaming and he's just screaming, "Kiss me!" like in his sleep. And I get it when romance writers have to put these two characters, they have to do something to get these two characters together and like close and intimate. But I also think it's so funny when it's really, really obvious and forced. Like someone in their sleep screaming, "Kiss me." Not one of the more subtle ways I've seen this done. Anyway, Sophie does kiss him because she just can't resist, but it's like a very light kiss. But this was kind of weird because like obviously he can't consent, he's asleep. But she kisses him. Sophie stays with Benedict for, I think it's like a week or so, where he is recovering from his illness. The entire time, both of the characters are super conflicted because Benedict, who has to admit to himself that he is attracted to her, is trying to treat her like this guest in his own cottage, but at the same time saying like, "I'm gonna get you a position at my mom's household." So, you know, he's still acknowledging that she is a servant and of the working class and that they're not actually on equal footing at all. And Sophie is highly, highly conscious of their class difference, and she knows that they can't ever actually be together in the way that she wants to be with someone. And she has this very hard boundary that she does not want to be anyone's mistress because she was an illegitimate child. She experienced so much pain and heartbreak and these feelings of not belonging growing up. She could never force her own child to go through that. So even though she is attracted to Benedict and she is basically in love with him, she is fighting this attraction because she knows that it can't go anywhere unless it's to become his mistress. But despite all of this, they're spending a lot of time together. Benedict is bedridden and she will go in and read books to him. She notices his sketches in his bedroom and realizes that he's actually a really good artist, and this is something that no one else knows about Benedict. And Benedict is also falling for her. At one point he's like, "Wow, her dress is really ugly," because she didn't have any clothes, so she's just wearing something that the housekeeper lent her, which is way too big for her. And he's having these feverish thoughts thinking he ought to buy her a new dress. She would never accept it, of course, but maybe if her current garments were accidentally burned. Sophie's trying to talk to him and he's not even listening to her because he's thinking about, how do I burn her hideous dress? But how could he manage to burn her dress? She would have to not be wearing it, and that posed a certain challenge in and of itself. I thought this part was really funny. I want to challenge Julia Quinn to write a male hero's inner thoughts where he is trying to like do something nice for the heroine without forcing her into it. There's this interaction where Sophie goes to take a stroll by the lake, and then she realizes that Benedict is standing in the lake and he is totally butt naked. And instead of like walking the other way like a polite person would do, she watches him from behind a tree. First of all, that is really creepy and she should definitely not be doing that, but we already know that Julia Quinn's books are iffy with consent. Anyway, he realizes he's being watched and he catches Sophie and he forces her to like turn around while he's getting dressed. And then at this point, they get closer together and they start making out. While they're kissing, Benedict starts saying like, "I'll dress you in silks and satins," like he wants to give her this lifestyle. And Sophie suddenly realizes he wants to make me his mistress. And she's like, oh hell no, because this is the one thing in life that she will not do. She's like, "I can't do this," and Benedict's like, "Why not?" like any woman in your position would jump at this opportunity. And Sophie doesn't explain her choice. She's understandably upset because Benedict just like is so arrogant and can't believe that any woman would turn him down. She just says, well, I won't be your mistress, but what are you gonna do instead? He hissed. Work as a housemaid? You'd rather wait on people, polish their silver, scrub out their damned chamber pots, than come and live with me. She said only one word, but it was low and true. Yes. His eyes flashed furiously. I don't believe you. No one would make that choice. So he keeps on being really aggressive and mean towards her because she said no to being his mistress. And Sophie realizes that he is taking this super personally and as like a personal rejection of himself, even though that's not what it is. At this point, Sophie's like, I'm gonna go pack my bags and just leave because obviously this is not working out. And Benedict just blows up. He gets really mad at her. He's like, do you have a job, a place to stay? And she's like, no. And he's like, well, I'm not gonna let you leave here with no money, no prospects. You bloody fool. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is in the world for a woman alone? And she's like, yeah, I've been alone. Having read Colin's book recently, I do realize that this is a recurring theme in Julia Quinn's novels and probably Regency novels in general. Although the more contemporary ones I've read, I feel like don't play as much into this anymore because of probably how people's tastes have evolved. There's this theme of the man being like, it's so dangerous for a woman alone, you're being stupid if you don't accept my help. So anyway, he's like going on and on, having a tirade, and Sophie starts tuning out. And then she's just like, oh, actually, you know, he seems really concerned about like my well-being and like if I'm safe, which is really nice of him considering I just rejected him. I mean, yes, but also like, girl, stand up. So they continue fighting. She says, you're not being fair. And he says, well, you're not being intelligent. And then, and this is one of my favorite parts of the book, she punches him in the face and he falls to the ground. And she says, don't you ever call me stupid. Love it. I think it's really funny that Julia Quinn will write these situations where the heroine gets to have like this really big moment of like standing up for herself, but it's almost always with the man that she is in love with. And you know, I get it because like in this world, every man is sexist and awful, but I also kind of wish that the man would not be sexist and awful. I don't know, it's not too much to wish for. I don't think it is. I think these books are just dated and they've been written a long time ago, and I know I've said that already, but I have to keep reminding myself. So then Benedict keeps saying, you're coming to London with me, you're gonna go get a job at my mom's house. And she's like, no, I'm really not gonna do that. So then he follows her back into the house, she starts packing up her things, and then it actually occurs to him, oh, you're illegitimate and that's why you don't want to be with me. But somehow he does not, upon having this realization, actually put two and two together. He's just like, Sophie, it's okay, I don't care that you're illegitimate. And she's like, it's not about you, it's about the fact that when we have kids, they would be illegitimate and they would go through what I had to go through growing up. And Benedict says, like, I would care for any children that we have. But then Sophie says, what about your wife? And Benedict just freezes because he's thinking about, ironically, the lady in silver. And Sophie catches his hesitation and she's just not having it. Benedict says, I have to marry someday. Sophie says, yes you do, but I don't have to be anyone's mistress. So at this point, Benedict realizes nothing is going to convince her, so he does something. He blackmails her. He says, if you don't go to London with me, I will inform the magistrate that you have stolen from me. Sophie says they'll hang me or send me to Australia, and Benedict says, not if I ask otherwise. I would request that you would be released into my custody. So this blackmail thing, I feel like the dark romance girlies might be into this. It is in essence kidnapping. He is kidnapping her and taking her to London. Me, myself, I don't like it. I think that is a crime. And Benedict from the show would never do this. Benedict from the show is a sweet, himbo man. He just wants to take drugs with his brothers and paint and have threesomes. This is not the Benny that we know from the Netflix show. This is someone else. This is a villain. So Benedict takes Sophie to London and he introduces her to his mom. Violet immediately clocks that her son is into this girl and she's gearing up to cast her true love spells because every time she figures out who her children are in love with, she's like, how can I get them together? Because of course, Violet Bridgerton is the paragon of true love in this universe. Honestly, I do love Violet as a character. The only thing I haven't liked about her is that she never told Daphne like what was going to happen to her on her wedding night. She was like, I'll tell you, and then she did not prepare her at all. Like Daphne was so confused, and as a result could actually not consent to anything because she didn't know what was going to happen or the consequences of it. When Sophie gets introduced to the Bridgertons and gets a job as their lady's maid, there's a lot of emphasis on how the Bridgertons aren't like other aristocratic families in a ton, because they actually care about paying their staff like a living wage, because of course the Bridgertons are absolute angels and can do no wrong, and they are perfect and pure and the best family in the world. Sophie loves the family, she loves Benedict's sisters. It reminds her of how she really wished for sisters of her own, but obviously grew up really alone and without family. And she's just really sad that Benedict has made her fall in love with his family, but she can't really be part of the family. Even if she was his mistress, she could never be accepted into the family in a respectable way. So as Sophie is settling into her job as the lady's maid, Benedict is constantly loitering at his mom's house and just bothering Sophie all the time while she's working. I did not find this part cute. I think it was supposed to be cute, but there is nothing more annoying to me than a man bothering a woman when she's working. Granted, he is trying to finance her life so that she doesn't have to work anymore, but she already said she didn't want that, and she is a working class woman. She has to work for her livelihood, and he's just sitting there like enjoying his rich life paid for by all of these working class people that they're exploiting, and he's just sitting there bothering her while she's like cleaning silverware or like polishing shoes and being like, well, you wouldn't have to do that if you were my mistress. Like, that's not cute. That's really fucking annoying. At one point, Sophie sees Araminta outside the house, and she realizes that they've moved nearby, and she basically has a panic attack. Benedict finds her and takes her to his own house to calm her down. They have a heart-to-heart where she says, I've seen your sketches, I know you're an artist, and he's like, well, I've never shown them to anyone. And she says, well, you should, you have the soul of an artist. And this is when he realizes that he actually loves her. I feel like there's a pattern of Julia Quinn's men falling in love or realizing they're in love when the woman says something that like really affirms who they are, and I think that's really sweet, but I also wish it were like the opposite way as well. It's like these relationships are helping these men find themselves, but then I don't feel like the same growth is given to the women. I find that that is something that I often have issues with historical romance because of the, I guess, the economic realities and all of that. So after he realizes that he loves her, they have sex. At this point, I was like, why is this happening? Because Sophie has said so many times that she does not want illegitimate children, and presumably Sophie does know how children come about because she knew enough to not want to be a mistress. Anyway, they have sex. Benny does not pull out, and then afterwards he assumes like they're gonna be together. And Sophie's like, nope, that was a one-time thing, like we probably shouldn't have done it. I really hope I'm not pregnant now. And Benedict is like, what the? Might be too late because we just had sex. But Sophie's like, that was a one-time thing, we're not doing this again, and then she leaves. They avoid each other for a while, but Violet realizes what's happening and she devises a plan to get them together. Violet is so supportive. She's even like, Benedict, if you marry this girl who is of working class, like, I'm not gonna disown you, I will support you, I would die for you. Because again, Mama Bridgerton is like true love's #1 fan. And through talking through it with his mom, Benedict realizes he is in love with Sophie, and that it doesn't matter what society thinks or what the town thinks, he thinks it's all worth it to be with her. Like, he would rather live in the countryside and be away from society if that's what it takes. So after this, Benny walks into a room where Sophie is playing a game with these kids who are visiting. I don't know, I forgot whose kids they are, but they're visiting. And Sophie is playing a game where she is blindfolded, and then Benedict sees her and realizes, that's my lady in silver. And instead of being overjoyed that this is the person that he has been searching for and that he's fallen in love with, he gets really upset, and they have an argument where he's like, you lied to me. I didn't really understand why he was that angry. I could understand him being a little bit upset because she did lie to him, but I also felt like it was really obvious why she would have lied to him. Clearly she was, you know, a servant and didn't think they could be together in a way that was congruent with how she wanted to live her life. So of course she didn't tell him the truth when he didn't realize it right away. But anyway, he gets really mad and he storms off, even though he was literally like 2 seconds ago about to propose. Because of course we need some kind of third act breakup. Now we were closing in on the ending, which is actually my favorite part of the book. This was the only part that I actually felt was, you know, actually fun. So what happens is Araminta finds out that Sophie is in London and gets her thrown into prison for theft, saying that Sophie stole her shoe clips, which she did, and her wedding ring, which she did not. So Sophie gets thrown in jail. Araminta goes to visit her and tells Sophie that she hates her because she is the illegitimate child. Sophie's also a reminder that Araminta was never able to have children with the Earl herself. At that time, not being able to bear children was seen as a failure, so for Araminta it was like a failure for her that she wasn't able to have a son with the Earl who would inherit the earldom, and instead they have to give it up to a distant cousin. Meanwhile, as Sophie is rotting in jail, Benedict finally realizes that he loves Sophie and he can't live without her, and it doesn't matter that she lied to him because, you know, they can work through it. And then they realize she is in prison because that's mentioned in Whistledown. He and Violet run to the jail to free her. Benedict like punches a guard to get inside, and as they reunite, Araminta is there like taunting Sophie. Benedict runs in and Sophie and him smooch like in between the bars, and Sophie just has this moment of pure petty joy when she realizes that Araminta saw all of that. And Araminta was so obsessed with getting one of her daughters to bag Benedict, but Sophie is the one who did it. And then Benedict is like, this is my fiance, you cannot have her in jail. And the magistrate and the warden are like, oh shit, we didn't know she was your fiance. And then Posy, the younger daughter of Araminta, runs in. She's like, I was the one who stole the shoe clips. She is taking the blame because she knows that as a countess's daughter, she's not going to face consequences for it. And then she also says the wedding ring is not stolen. Araminta has it in her spare jewelry box. And then she also says that she read the will and that she knows about the dowry that Araminta stole from Sophie. This is the best part. Violet gets really evil and she's like, well, Araminta, who is the thief now? And the magistrate is like, you're not saying we have to throw the countess in jail, right? I guess they couldn't throw rich people in jail back in the day. They're not really doing it these days either. Anyway, Violet bribes the prison guard and the magistrate to leave them alone so that she can negotiate terms with Araminta, aka blackmail her. And Violet is like, Araminta, you don't have the dowry anymore, do you? And Araminta, who definitely spent it on like shoes or whatever, is like, no. And Benedict's like, I don't need the dowry. Violet, who just wants happiness for her kids and their true loves, no matter the cost apparently, is like, Araminta, you're going to tell everyone who asks that Sophie is actually the daughter of the late Earl's distant cousin, therefore making her legitimate in the eyes of the ton. Otherwise, I'm going to send my solicitor to your door and have him ask for the dowry, which Benedict is legally owed because he's going to marry Sophie. And the final nail in Araminta's coffin is when Sophie's like, well, we can't leave Posy with her because she's definitely going to suffer at the hands of her evil mom for betraying her and being on Sophie's side. Violet invites Posy to stay with the Bridgertons indefinitely, and when Araminta's like, you can't do that, that's my daughter, Violet's like, what was the name of my solicitor again, Benedict? I did not expect to see Mama Bridgerton blackmailing a woman, but I think we now know where Benedict gets it from. So at the end, Benedict does apologize for the blackmail, the kidnapping, and just overall being really insensitive and lacking empathy for Sophie's situation. And then Sophie also apologizes for lying, but I don't feel like she had to apologize for anything because I don't think she actually did anything wrong. I feel like the book tried to make it seem like they both did something wrong, but I don't think Sophie actually did anything wrong, especially because in her situation, she was just protecting herself. Like when you think about the fact that Benedict could actually just lie and have her thrown in jail or hanged or sent to Australia, it makes sense that she would rather protect herself than open herself up for any situation where she could be taken advantage of. And he did take advantage of their power difference. So I feel like, you know, her fears were completely valid and she was right for that. So my main criticisms of the book, well, the first one is that Benedict basically had no personality. I think he had a personality of like a piece of paper with some temper tantrums sprinkled in. There was none of that cute, silly, goofy personality that we know and love from the show. There wasn't even like another personality that he had in the book. He was kind of just copy and paste Anthony with like maybe fewer anger issues. and a little bit less daddy trauma, but otherwise basically the same man. And she just like copy and pastes him for Colin as well. And I think honestly Simon was like pretty similar, although I feel like Simon, his anger felt a little more justified because he was like really angry at his dad. But the others, like, I don't really, there was no reason for Benedict to be that mad. There was no reason for him to go full supervillain and blackmail and kidnap Sophie. I do wish that the men felt different and unique and like their own people. I get it if readers enjoy that, because like it can be fun to just have this ideal man that you can like paste your fantasies onto, but I also feel like he was not the ideal man, and maybe that's the problem. Like maybe it'd be fine if it was copy and paste, if they were like actual men that I found attractive and like did not make me want to run in the opposite direction. I did like Sophie as a character. I appreciated having a working class woman as the heroine because that's not something that we usually see. Did not like that Benedict was not at all sensitive to the realities of her being a working class woman. At one point he says that he detests men who take advantage of their power dynamics with like working class women and servants and take advantage of them. But he essentially ends up doing the very same thing. And the book tries to make an argument that it was because of love and he couldn't let her go, but that is just like justifying abuse. I don't know, I just feel like there are so many better ways to show that a man is in love than to have him commit crimes. There's like flowers, letters. My other main critique is that the romance itself felt very thin and underdeveloped. It is an insta love or like love at first sight kind of book, which I think can work in some cases, but in those cases you do have to have like more moments for them to build their emotional connection to the point where you feel like it's worth fighting for and that it is like valid and not just an initial attraction. And I felt like the time and space that should have been devoted to that was when Benedict was really sick and Sophie was nursing him, and we are told that they spent a lot of time together and she's like in his room like reading to him, and that's when they really start to bond. But I wasn't really feeling that amount of time together really made sense for the level of like connection they supposedly had. And I also didn't feel like their conversations during that time period really allowed them to get to know each other super well, because Sophie is not truly honest with him about her backstory until very late in the book. Even when he realizes he loves her, it doesn't really feel like he knows her that well yet. I did like the side characters, I liked the subplots, I thought those were pretty fun and campy. But the actual main romance part of the book, which is the meat of the book, just dragged on for me, honestly. There is a part at the end where Benedict realizes that the lady in silver he had been chasing for 2 years was really just this idea, and Sophie is real and he's in love with the real person that is Sophie, and that initial infatuation was not really love. So there is that like awareness. I think also because Benedict again did not have a personality, so I didn't really understand like why Sophie was in love with him, besides the fact that he was kind of like her rescuer, her like Prince Charming. But again, that is also like an ideal you have in your head. It's not really who he is as a person, it's just like who he is to her and like her kind of like fantasy of what she wanted her life to be. Moving on to what I hope will happen with the Netflix show, I am curious if they will gender swap Sophie. I don't really have a preference either way, but I am really happy that they confirmed that Benedict is bisexual on screen and it wasn't just like teased. I know people were like, well, I knew already because of, I think it was like maybe season 1 or 2. It was like giving major vibes, but a lot of shows will tease and then like profit off the ambiguity without actually giving representation. So I'm glad that they actually are confirming that he is bisexual. And also obviously you don't have to have experience with both or all genders in order to be bisexual, but it was nice to see it confirmed, because then now no one can like deny it, you know, because if it's just like a glance or something, then people can still be like, well, he's actually straight. So I do think if they gender swap Sophie, it would change the power dynamic, and I think then we wouldn't have the mistress conflict because then they wouldn't be able to have illegitimate children. But I do think there's already a conflict already with the class difference. Benedict's journey this past season felt really sloppy. Like, I don't know what they were doing with his art and why he didn't even like mention it at all. Like, all of a sudden he's not into art anymore. Maybe it was hinted at that he got really discouraged or fell out of love with it. Maybe when he found out that Anthony basically bribed his way into art school, like maybe that is what made him fall out of love with art a little bit. And then maybe when Sophie is in the picture, that will bring that spark back for him. So I do want to see that. I want to see him falling back in love with art and like finding his way again. I do hope that they have some like masquerade and Cinderella elements because that's really fun, and like the dress that Sophie is described to be wearing was really pretty in the book. She's described to be wearing like this silver kind of net thing over her dress with like pearls in it. The costume design department would have a ball with that. Pun intended. I really want to see Violet bribing a prison guard in the show, but I can't imagine that happening. In the book, it was already so like out of nowhere, but I really can't imagine it happening in the show. However, it would be hilarious if it did. Anyway, I don't have very many strong feelings about the show adaptation. Because I don't have very many strong feelings about the book itself, I will probably forget everything that happened in this book by next week. All I really hope is that Benedict keeps being sweet and silly and that he doesn't blackmail his future wife or husband. That's all I'm hoping for. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to find me elsewhere, you know where to look. Otherwise, I will see you next time.